All right, so how about now? Is that better? Can you hear the music? Come on, please tell me. Music on? Crossing all the fingers? Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. There we go. Maximum fingers crossed. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're like 4:10 now. So it seems like people are doing all right. Is the music too loud also? Because I think I was messing with the levels a little bit. So hopefully it's maybe like a little bit down. Because I actually can't hear it at the same level you can hear it. So I don't actually know how loud it is. So you're gonna tell me if it's too loud or too low, right? Please. Okay, so today we are talking about animation. So remember last week we were supposed to do animation stuff last week, 3D animation, but we did a little detour, did the zines. Hopefully people had fun doing the zines, something a little bit like just something easy, you know, like something different. So I hope people enjoyed that. We have so now we have to get on to animation, the stuff that we were originally supposed to do last week, but that's okay. So we have it this week. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that ready. We have like, this is like the most complicated stream I've been doing a Twitch for my other classes too, so not just this one. And this is probably the most complicated one because I have a lot of stuff to show you all. So give me just a second. Alright, so let's get through. We have some slides, so hopefully I'm able to like this would be impossible if I didn't have two monitors. Like I have like so many things open right now. Okay, so some basic 3D animation stuff. And has anyone done any 3D animation yet? I know some people had worked with Blender in the past. So I'm just curious if anyone has any 3D animation experience or familiarity. So just respond in the chat if you do. I'm just curious. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. This is just an introduction. Garx, Omar has some in Unity. Other people do not, and that's totally cool. The expectation is that you don't have any knowledge of 3D animation yet. So if you don't worry about it. So today we're gonna talk about two different kinds of animation, two different approaches. So the first one is keyframe animation. So we're gonna be doing that in Blender. So some of these things are concepts you're familiar with, so I just wanna go over them really quickly. So timeline, so you've worked with timelines in other applications. You probably used like Premiere from GD110. So you have a number of different frames over time, and you have markers where things are happening over time, right? So you have on the left here is like frame 0 all the way up to 250. So this is actually a screenshot from the Blender interface. So it just represents the change over time in terms of frames. So now, and by the way, how many of you have heard of keyframe before? Idea of a keyframe. Okay, so some people have. So keyframes are used in animation and filmmaking, something that defines the starting and end point of any smooth transition. So if you think about, we looked at like these basic walk cycles before, like a few weeks ago. So if you remember, like this was a very simple like 4-frame walk cycle. And so you could think about these as keyframes. These are important points in a timeline in animation where something is like, they represent when something is a point of change. So like you could basically like have these 4 frames and it will give you the idea of the animation. It's missing the in-between animation, so it doesn't have like the like all, you know, like the legs here And legs here are in different positions. So like if you were to make a smooth animation, it would be smooth. It wouldn't be like one frame and then the next frame, so jumpy. So keyframes are just those really important ones that tell you the point of change. So we can think of each one of these four as a keyframe, and we can think of all the frames that might come in between in a smooth animation to be the in-between frames, or tweening between frames. And please stop me if this doesn't make sense, or if you have questions. I am totally down to stop, answer your questions, help you out. So we have here an example of a bouncing ball. So you have the bouncing ball, it starts here, right? So you can see it's kind of squished. And so that's like the maximum amount of squish when it's bouncing. And then when it hits the bottom, that's a point of change, right? When a ball bounces and it hits the ground, that frame that you have where it hits the ground and then it comes back up. So that's a point of change. And then you have the second keyframe here is when the ball is at the top. So that ball at the top is when it's like the maximum volume. So it's like kind of poofed out, you know, it's not squished at all. And so it's also a point of change because when it hits that high point, it's going to come back down. And so the third keyframe is back when it's squished again. So those are three keyframes that are necessary to explain this motion of going up and down and squeezing in and out. So all of these little like transparent frames, these are the in-between ones. And in a lot of animation tools, these will be filled in automatically. So I mentioned this tweening. So you have, what happens between keyframes, at least in Blender, is that it basically does the guesswork between the first keyframe and the second keyframe. So it figures out everything it needs to do automatically, how to transition between those two frames. So you might have this start frame. So like, let's say that this is an animation of something getting bigger. So like we have a circle here and it starts off small and it gets big. So it knows that in order to get from that small point, the small circle to the large circle, it needs to have, for each frame, it has a slightly larger circle. So it makes it slightly larger. So you only have to know what the first keyframe is and what the second keyframe is, and then it'll do all the work in between. That's why we call it tweening. So that's it for the slides right now. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't make sense. I'm happy to clarify this. I'm also not an animator, so you might, if you're really interested in this stuff, I would recommend taking an animation course. So you have like a lot of animation electives. So you have concepts in animation, you have 3D computer animation 1, you have motion graphics, stuff like that. So let's see. So now I'm going to open up Blender. All right, so we have Blender open here again, and I actually have, this is the can. And quick note, I personally, so I know that Marcelo taught the previous classes in 3D in Blender, and he likes the industry standard shortcuts, so he had you switch them. And I use the Blender shortcuts. So whenever I'm in this demo, I'm going to try to avoid using any shortcuts if I can help it. So if I use something that doesn't make sense, or you're not sure how I did something, or I told you I pressed a key and it didn't make sense, go ahead and stop me, let me know, and I will try to correct it. So I have the soda can here. So this is probably like similar to what yours looks like. And I just used the same shared model from Marcelo's class. So if you've noticed in Blender, you have these different workspaces for different things. So I'll use some of them together, like you used, what is it? I think you used shading with working with the materials and things, with the UV unwrapping, UV edit, stuff like that. And you've probably seen the one for animation as well. So if we look at that animation one, by default it gives you two different views, and it gives you the timeline on the bottom. So in those two different views, this is what I'm going to do. So I'm switching back to object mode for both of these. And so in your scene, you have, like over here, you have, by default, you should have a camera, right? So there's a camera listed here. And if we just like turn on some of these, where's our camera? So we actually, and I don't think, did you use the camera at all in the 3D classes you did before? I can't remember. I'm gonna reset this. I had this in there earlier. Did you use the camera at all? No? Okay, cool. Thank you for letting me know. Michael? Is that Michael? You deleted the camera. Okay, so if you deleted the camera, which is totally cool because it wasn't super needed, you can always add it back. So at the top of your object mode view, there's the option to add the camera. Nick. Okay. Still hard to remember people's usernames, except for Moss Tacos, please. That one's really easy. And TJ. If you have your name in the thing, it's easier. Sorry about that, Nick. Okay, so what we can do, so I have a camera in my view, and there's like next to the object mode view up here, you have this little drop down. You can go to View, Cameras, Active Camera, and this will actually show you the view from the camera. So it'll give you this kind of grayed out view, and you can see the exact framing. So in that framing, this is like really close up, right? Can you tell how close this is? It's like really into that gator juice. By the way, would anyone drink gator juice? Is this something you're interested in? How many of you have eaten alligator? Has anyone eaten alligator? Or drank gator juice for that matter? I've eaten alligator. And I guess I drank gator juice because there was juice in the meat. Yeah, I did it in Florida. The gator juice is of course an energy drink to make you have gator energy or whatever. But yeah, alligator, like, it just tastes like chicken in my experience. I mean, I had it fried, so I'm sorry if anyone's vegetarian. It just tastes like chicken nuggets, honestly. So it's pretty good. So we have our camera here, and I kind of like don't think this is a great view for the camera. So what I'm going to do is once again I went to the little hamburger icon next to object mode. I went to View, Cameras, Active Camera, and what we can also do is we can go to so if I move this around more, I can always go back to View, Align View, Align Active Camera to View. And what this will do is it will actually set your viewpoint to be your camera. So you can actually rotate around just by looking in your view. So I can like change my view in the window. And let's say I want this to be my framing. I can then go to the hamburger icon, go under View, go to Align View, Align Active Camera to View. And so it will set that up so I can just navigate, and that's an easier way of setting the camera position. Another thing you can do is you can go under that, expand out those menus again, and you can go to Navigation, and you can go to Walk Navigation. And what that will do is it will give you a first-person perspective, basically. So think about if you've ever played a first-person perspective game, the mouse becomes the view, and you can use WASD to move around. So W will move forward, S will move backwards, A will move left, D will move right, Q will move down, and E will move up. And I think that should be the same in whichever version of the controls you're using, whichever key mapping. So should I market this gator juice? Do you think it's something worthwhile? I have family in Florida, so maybe we can arrange something. Anyone looking to get into the gator juice business? Okay, so I think that's like a pretty good camera view. So what we're gonna do is socks. like stonks. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have some you put us on. So I'm gonna create my first keyframe. So what you can do is, and I'm trying to remember, I think if you're using the industry standard one, I think it's S on the keyboard. So if you select the thing in your scene that you want to have create the keyframe for, so like let's say you want to move something from one position to another. So for right now, on River I shared my can rotating. I don't know if you saw that. So we're just going to do something similar here. So I'm going to select my can in my object view here, and if I'm on, it's S, I believe, to insert keyframes in the industry standard one, and it's I if you're using the Blender shortcuts. So I'm going to use, I selected the can, I pressed I, you would press S, and so there are all kinds of different options for the types of things, the types of changes you want to record. So I'm just going to select visual loc-rot scale, meaning that it's recording the position of the can, the position, the rotation, and the scale. Those three things. So that's, and you notice in the timeline down here, it's created these yellow dots, and it shows like the can, it shows this action, and I can actually expand this object transforms out. It has the X, the Y, the Z position, the rotation, and the scale for all 3 dimensions. And so if I drag this along here, this will actually show, and I actually have some previous animations in here where I was changing the lighting. So if I drag this, you can see how the lights are changing. So we have, this is the directional light. And so let's say we want to have, and I should mention that by default, I think in this bottom right hand corner of the timeline, you see it says start and end. So that means the starting frame and the ending frame. So if you want to have, usually things are either 24 frames per second, 24 is usually used for film, 30 frames per second, which is often used for console games and used for TV programs and stuff like that. And then 60 frames per second is often used for PC games and things like that. So if we had 120 frames, then it depends on the frame rate, but I usually think about that as 2 seconds. And so if we move along this, it also shows our current frame down here. And if I drag this back to 0, I can hit play, and it will play along the timeline, showing me what's happening over time. So if we want to, let's say that we want this to start in this position, and if I drag this to like 60 frames, I can select this and I'm going to rotate it. So I'm going to rotate, so you can use, if you press E in the industry standard shortcuts, it'll bring up the rotating tool. I'm going to use the Blender shortcuts. So I'm just going to rotate along the Z axis so I can also see it on the left. So I'm just going to rotate it around to maybe like here. And so if I want to insert another keyframe, I can press I again if I'm in the Blender shortcuts, or S if you're using the industry standard shortcuts. And so now when I've created that second keyframe, notice how this is populated here in the timeline. So if I drag this back and I scrub the timeline, you can see that it's rotating the can. So like that animation, I just generated it. So I recorded this initial keyframe, which was, it kept the information about the location, the rotation, and the scale. And then when I created the second keyframe, I again did the visual loc-rot scale. So it looked for that, compared the two, and realized that I'm animating from the one rotation to the next rotation. Does that make sense? So let's see, I'm just gonna play it. And while I'm waiting, so tell me if it makes sense what we just did. We created the first keyframe at 0, and then we moved it to frame 60. We did the rotation, so I rotated it around, and then I inserted another keyframe. So another thing you can do is there's also like a little, if you see the circle down here in the timeline, this will actually like auto key based on your movements, which usually works pretty well, but sometimes it's a little weird if you forget that it's turned on. So this will automatically look, whenever you move to a new frame, it will automatically look for changes and record them. Cool. Thank you for the feedback. I appreciate it. So let's say that I want to make this. So now I moved the playhead down to 120 frames. So now I'm going to rotate it along. Just trying to make it something weird. So I've rotated it in some kind of weird way, so I'm going to insert a keyframe here. S if you're using the industry standard ones. So now when I play it, you can see that from 0 to 60 frames, it does this kind of rotating around the label. And then once from between 60 and 120 frames, it does the weird rotation. So I hope that all makes sense. It seems like we're good. It's hard to tell when you don't have much feedback because you can't see like people's like WTF faces. So thank you for all that. Okay, so let's see. Are there any questions about what we did together? I know it's pretty simple, right? So we just did these basic keyframe animations. We have 3 keyframes, so everything in the middle here, these are those in between frames. So it's just guessing whatever it needs to do to transition between the first keyframe and the second keyframe, it automatically does that. Cool. So I could also like so Nick asks, so to go over it again, all it did was record the way you rotated it. So in this case, I was just doing rotations. So I could also, let's say, so in this case, it recorded the position as well. So if I go to like frame 60, I could alternatively, like, let's say I wanted to scale this up or something. So I'm gonna scale it up. And then if I go back to add that keyframe again, so now it also has the scale as well. So you can see that it gets bigger, it does its rotation, and then it rotates around and gets back to small again. Because when I inserted the first keyframe, it was small. When I inserted the third keyframe, it was also small. And now it has scale as well. So I could also do position. So let's say that I want position to be, let's see, I'm just gonna move this maybe like over here. And so you might need to, if you're not using the auto keying, make sure that you have that keyframe in there. Cool. So now it's like moving toward the camera, it's getting like way too big, and it's doing its rotate around until it gets to the end. And so that's the, okay, cool. So that's the basics of a keyframe animation. So now that I have my Gator Juice can animation, if you go on the right hand side, you know, you have all these different options and things. If you go to the one that looks like a printer, the icon that looks like a printer, which is called output properties, you can look through here and it'll give you settings for how you're outputting or rendering. So have you all heard of the word rendering before, or render? Cool. So if you haven't, in a 3D program at least, you can render something out as an image or a video. So you're basically like having everything drawn at very high fidelity. And so what we want to do for this is we want to actually output a video of our animation. So usually I make the resolution, I make it 1080p, so that's 1920 wide and 1080 tall. You can also use this percentage to scale it as well. you can decide the frame start, the frame end, the frame rate. And if you scroll down, you might need to expand options out. So for output, it asks you what folder you want to export it to. And then it also, and one thing to be careful of is it might, if you have this on by default, overwrite, which I think it is on by default, it will, like if you do multiple exports, it will overwrite the files that you had. So make sure that's off. And so for file format, by default, I believe it's PNG. So PNG is, as you know from GD110, PNG is a still image. So it's good for stills, good for images, but it's bad for video. So if I was to render this out right now, it would render out 120 PNGs, which is not great. So if I click the drop down and then I go to FFmpeg video, and the rest of the stuff should be fine. You can just leave it as default. So this will give us an actual video file, which is in NKV, I believe. So now that I have these settings here in the output properties, you go to render at the top of Blender. You have two options, render image and render animation in the first part. I'm going to go to render animation, and it will give me a new pop-up window here. And you'll see that it actually goes through the timeline at the bottom and renders out each frame of the video. And so you can see it's rendering out each frame as it goes along. It has a percentage for each frame. So depending on the complexity of what you're doing, this can be very fast or very slow. Like this would be very fast because it's the 3D model only has 126 faces. It has very simple textures and materials. So this is considered very fast, but you could have something that renders out and it takes days to render. So if you have something very complex, just be aware of that it can take a very long time to render out, especially for video. So I'm just waiting for this to finish rendering. We're about halfway through. What time did people wake up today? I'm just curious. Or go to sleep last night? Let's see, I woke up pretty late, relatively late. I woke up at like 11. I went to sleep like 2 maybe? Sleep is, I assume, weird for everyone. So TJ, did you go to sleep at 7 or did you wake up at 7? Because I know a lot of people are nocturnal right now. Okay, so Nick went to sleep at 8. Woke up just in time for class. I remember all too well when I was a college student and completely nocturnal. I used to wait for, I lived in the dorms for like 2 years at my college, and there was breakfast at 7 a.m. in the cafeteria, and I would stay up like every night because I love breakfast food. So it's pretty much nocturnal for a while. Being indoors is hard for weeks. Yeah, it's hard because like you don't have as much of the sun to like kind of regulate you. It's also like if you live in like a basement or something, it's super hard to stay, like, keep your circadian rhythms regulated. Beautiful soul. Is that Michael? Are you? Sorry, I'm like having trouble remembering all the usernames. And Shock Croc? Who are you again? And also, if there's anyone who's not a student, let us know who you are. Okay, cool. Jason. Need to go to class in order for me to stay on top of work. Yeah, I think it's also like really hard if you don't have like synchronous classes, if you don't have like a class to go to, if it's just like a whole bunch of stuff online and you can just do it whenever. I think that makes it a lot harder. So now our render is complete, and if like by default it just gives us like an image, but we should be able to go to render view animation, and it will then show us the animation in its totality. And so I also have, the file is also exported, so if I look in this TMP folder, I will see the file that was exported. So that was not too hard, right? pretty easy to get some basic keyframe animations going. Are there any questions before we move on? Cool. Okay, so people are good. Ray, Eden, that Manuel. If we want the texture to show it rolling, what will we do? Do you mean like the texture like moving in the material? Like the offset of it? I think we should have clipped specific parts for people that missed class. What do you mean by that, Nick? I'm not sure I understand. You mean like cut short little pieces of the video? The bunch which to go back to basically. Yeah, I know Marcelo cut up one of the 3D videos into clips. So I'm not. Was that helpful for anyone that was looking at it? So you can. I'll come back to the chat and check in a second. But for now, we're looking at. So we talked about basic keyframe animations. Now we're thinking about rigging and humanoid animation. So some of you may have heard of the term rigging. If you think about a body, like most of you occupy bodies. Well, I moved its position, but changing the rotation only affects its vertical. So make sure that when you set the keyframe up, make sure it's listing all the changes that you're trying to record. Because if you just select one of those options, it might not record everything. So make sure you do that when you insert the keyframe. You can also try the auto keying, that little circle button. We occupy bodies, right? And so like if you think about like your hand, for instance, your hand consists of like some fleshy material, right? Your skin. It consists of your bones, your joints. The joints are the things that link your bones. The bones are the things that give your hand structure. So if you imagine that your hand does not have bones, it's just gonna like flop over. Like it has, you could like wave it and it's just like jelly. So like if we don't have that structure, we don't have a hand. It's like just something else. It's not the same. So if we are thinking about that, rigging is the process of adding bones and joints to something to give it structure, to make it move in a predictable way. And so if we just look at an example of what that might look like, so you can think about like all the different like major, generally like places where things move. So you have like, for instance, you have your shoulders can move back and forth, your head can move up or down, it can rotate. You have your legs can move up or down, your knees, those are your joints and the bones within them. And so rigging is just setting up that basic, like the technical animation structure for something to move based on those rules of like things that are rigid and things that move in predictable ways. So because otherwise it's just jelly. So a lot of Kill Dread, we'll return to Blender in a little bit, and I can try to figure out what's going on. So that's like rigging is done for pretty much like all complex animations, especially with like humans. So these are often usually combined with motion capture. So if you're not familiar with motion capture, also known as mocap, it's a way of recording positions in space. So you have things where you have a motion capture studio where there are lots of cameras set up, and there are markers, and there's an actor who's going through certain motions, and it will record the movement of different things on their body. So like for instance, you see all these little dark markers on the face here and on the mouth. And so like as this person moves their mouth or moves their face, it's recording the relative positions of all those points. So just some more examples of what that looks like. So once they have all of this information about the movement and things, and this became popular, I don't know, maybe like 10 years ago, maybe more, I'm not sure. Once this became popular, the animations in games started becoming a lot more realistic, a lot less weird. So if you go back to a game like, for instance, Half-Life, like the first Half-Life, and you look at some of the animations, they're very stiff and robotic. And then once you started having more motion capture technology, then things started looking a lot smoother, a lot more realistic, because they're literally based on real people recording the movement. So you can also see these like kind of circular markers as well. So people might even do motion capture for things that are not humans, just to get an idea of, because you can, as a person with a body, you can control the movement of your body more easily than you can something on a computer, even though you have more control on the computer. So if I'm just gonna exit this and take a look back in Blender, and I guess I should say, no, I don't need to save this. So I'm going to open up a rigged character example. So here is an example of a character that has already been rigged. So it already has this skeleton. So like all of these kind of shapes are bones, and little circles are the joints. The joints are the things that join the bones together. Those are the pivot points. So, and if I look, I can change the view here to be a little bit nicer. So you can see this is like an anime character. And so I could select one of the bones or something, and I could rotate it around. I could rotate on the x-axis. What should I make the person do? Should I make them wave, or I don't know what to do. Help me. You can even make it move in like a way that it shouldn't move. Okay, dab. Oof. Okay, now I have to think about it. Okay, so I'm gonna try to rotate the head down. Rotate. Hold on. It's like this arm is out here. This arm's out there. Gosh, you're making me really think about this. That was a hard one. You can do something easy like waving. But you can see as I'm not a dabber. I don't know what this is, this cultural phenomenon. No, this is fun. I'm just kidding. So I'm just like rotating these things. Yeah, and this is gonna be kind of like a derpy dab. Also, okay, so I'm not gonna take too long on this, but like you can get an idea, and I can turn off. So like you can see how when I move the bones around, you can see that it manipulated the mesh. So the mesh actually changed. So this is a pose mode. So we're not going to be doing this in Blender. I'm just showing as an example. Because if you want to manually rig something, you could dedicate an entire semester to like how to do that. So I'm just trying to get you to be familiar with the concepts themselves. So let's see. So when I go back, you can see that the mesh actually is still looks like this, and this is A pose. So you may be familiar with things like T pose, where people are standing out with their arms to the side. and this is more of an A pose. That's what's called. So we have, so the skeleton will manipulate it in a way that is predictable and is like a human. And rigs and bones and joints and stuff can be added for things that aren't humans as well. But humans are probably the most common application. So does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. I'm going to open up. Cool. So here I have like a very simple kind of stick figure looking humanoid character that I just sculpted really fast. So if you don't remember from the optional week, Marcelo had done a sculpting demo. So if you're interested in sculpting, which is probably, for me, it's probably the most fun you can do and the most fun you can have with 3D. So check that out if you haven't already. And it's also pretty easy to get started, just like playing with clay. So we have a basic humanoid character, and it does not have a rig, it does not have bones, it does not have joints that link the bones. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called Mixamo. So Mixamo is an Adobe product, and it's free to use, at least for now. And it has an auto rigging function where if you have a humanoid model, you can import it and you can set up some things and it will do all the work for you. So we're going to do that together. So, and you don't need to follow along right now unless you want to. So what I'm going to do, this is a blend file, so it's a Blender native format. I'm going to actually go to File, Export, and I'm going to export it as an FBX. So FBX is a file format that is more universal than Blend. So the two most commonly accepted 3D file formats are OBJ and FBX. So I'm going to export the FBX here. And so I'm just going to export it into my folder. And so now Mixamo is actually a web-based software. So if you just go to mixamo.com, M-I-X-A-M-O, it will ask you to log into your Adobe account. So it's free, but you do have to have the Adobe account, which is, you just sign up. You don't have to have a Creative Cloud subscription. All you need is an Adobe account. So you can go to characters and animations. So there are a whole bunch of characters that they have pre-created in here, and it's a spoiler alert. So they have a whole bunch of these characters that you can see, and that you could potentially use, and I think they're licensed for use. I think you can use them in your projects if you wanted to. And then you have this upload character option. So if I go to upload character, I can actually select the file that I just exported, which was basichumanoid2.fbx. And so it's importing the file. This is the one I just exported. So if I tried to import a .blend, it wouldn't work. So that's why you have to export it. And so it's going to import it as best as it can. So what I noticed about this is the character's facing the wrong way. So because in the text over here, it says that ideally your character should be in T-pose, which it's not, but that's okay. Like this, arms out, and then fingers spread apart. Use the arrow buttons to rotate your character and have its front face forward. So right now it's facing backwards, so I can rotate this. So this is actually forward now. I can hit next. And so it gives you these little drag tools. So it's asking for these different parts. So the chin, so if I drag this, I can locate the chin area and I can put it where I think the chin would be. I can drag these wrists. By default, it uses symmetry, so, and it has a little zoomed in section in the top right. So I'm locating where I think the wrists are, and then the elbows, the knees. That's where the knee is. This is not a realistic person at all. And then the groin. And then once you have those things in position, you can advance to the next option. It might take a minute or so. And so what it's doing is it's laying out all of those bones and joints and linking them to the mesh. And so now it should have a demo of what that looks like, and it should play an animation along with it. So you can see that it actually looks like a person now because it's moving in a humanoid way. So if you just next through this, and then you go to animations on the top, you can see like a whole bunch of different animations that they have. So we have like samba dancing, capoeira, haunting, and then the blue ones and the red ones are supposed to be more feminine movements, and the blue ones are supposed to be more masculine movements. And they have ones that are also like relevant for games specifically, so they have a lot of ones that involve weapons, because there are a lot of games that involve weapons. They have ones for sports, all kinds of different things. Agony, which is a common thing in games, unfortunately. Death, also a common theme. And so you can see it like it's using the skeleton that it created that linked the mesh, and able to have whatever I want based on what it has. And they have 52 different pages of animation, so they have quite a few to choose from. You can also like use these sliders to modify the animation a little bit. Like overdrive is when you want to like really overdo it, like overact kind of. Cool. So like if you wanted to use something like this, you could actually hit download, and I use Unity mostly, so if you wanted to use this in Unity, you could hit the download button under format. Instead of FBX, change it to FBX for Unity, and then hit download, and it will actually package everything with the model, any kind of materials or textures that you have, and the animation, and put it all together, and you can save it. If you're going to do that for something in Unity, because you might be taking maybe digital games or something, I would recommend using one of the packs. So on the left, they have single animations, and then they have these ones that look like they have ones behind them as well, and they have a number in the bottom left-hand corner, and those have like a whole bunch of different animations. So the most useful ones that are simple are the locomotion ones. So if you search for locomotion, or just search for a pack and look through it, you can see that it has one like basic locomotion pack, so it'll have like walking, running, turning, jumping, stuff like that, basic movement oriented things. So when you download it, it'll include all of those things. And we're not going to use these, we don't use Unity in this class. However, if you're interested, I will link you to another video from my other class in which we actually animate these in Unity. We bring them in and have them controlled by a player. So you can see how you could create a humanoid character in Blender, export it, bring it in here, and it makes it very easy for you to get going. So does that sound useful to people? Or useful potentially for projects you might be working on? Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna demo one more thing in Blender. So I'm just gonna create a new file, and so it gives you that default cube, right? And I'm just gonna switch to my animation view, and if I go into the edit mode, I'm gonna I'm gonna give this cube some more resolution. So instead of just having the 8 points, I'm going to go to edge, subdivide, which will like duplicate that, so it'll create additional vertices in the middle. So if I do it like a few times, then I have a lot more resolution. And so I'm also going to add, I'm going to add another shape. Maybe I'll add a cylinder. And I'm just going to move it. Maybe I will rotate it. Okay. So there are some simulation things in Blender, and we're not going to get deep into this. I just wanted to show you, just if you're interested. So when you select an object and you look on your right-hand side menu, there's a little like circle with a dot in the middle, and these are physics properties. So one thing that I've been playing around with a little bit lately are the cloth simulations. So if you select cloth here and you have your object selected that you want to add that to, it will actually simulate cloth. So if you I'm not sure what the button is in the industry standard one, but in the Blender shortcuts, you press space and it will play the animation. So when I play this animation, I don't have any keyframes. It's not related to the keyframe animation we saw earlier, but you can see that now it's actually falling. So it's actually being affected by gravity. So gravity is being simulated right now. So the reason I set up this other object here is because I wanted this to interact with it. So if I select this other object, I can add collision, and this will make it able to collide with the cube. So now when it falls, it's affected by that fall. So you can see how it crumples up. So it's simulating if it was cloth. So it looks like cardboard almost, right? Like a cardboard box that gets like slammed down. Maybe it's wet or something. Let's say we want it. I could also make it fading better or not. I'll switch that back to flat. And so you can actually modify some of these things. So like now looking through the cloth options, you can change the vertex mass. So each vertex has its own mass. So looking in, if we look back at edit mode, it has like a whole bunch of vertices, right? So each one has its own mass. So if you have something that is a very complex mesh with like, you know, 1 million vertices, then each vertex should not weigh very much. But if you only have a few, then you might want to make it weigh more. So we can see what it looks like. And I can also have this, if I make this like 60 frames, I can have it play in the background, and then I can just modify these things on the fly. So you see that I changed the vertex mass to be heavier, and now it crumples up a lot more. I can make it lower again, crumples up less because it has less weight in each one of those vertices. For the stiffness, you can just drag this up or down to affect it. You can change the tension, compression. If you hover over it, it'll tell you like what that means exactly. So for tension, and let me know if you have any questions. It's not doing it right now where it's telling you what it, but if you hover over it normally, it should do that. So you can change these sliders, just see how that affects it. You could have some interesting simulations, some animations like that. So just something to play around with. You can play around with these different options, like internal springs. You can change, you can have a constant pressure upon it. So it can be positive or negative. So if you make it positive, it's like a pressure from the inside going outside. So you can imagine like, I don't know, like a can of soda or something that's in the freezer, and then it like has all that internal pressure. You can also make it negative, and then it kind of crumples up. It has like some kind of suction. So now our cube is like turning into like a ball of trash or something. And so you can also, if you go to field weights, you can affect the various forces upon it. So if I didn't want it affected by gravity, I could just set it to 0. So I just wanted to show you that because I think it's pretty cool, pretty fun. You could also potentially add cloth to that one as well. You know, you could have like whole bunch of different things going on in here. So yeah, you can also do fluid simulations. You can do a whole bunch of stuff in Blender, and I haven't used most of it. So something to explore if you're interested. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to show you for related to this animation stuff is the program Adobe Fuse. So I asked if you could download it. So it's another piece of Adobe free software. So was anyone able to install it? You could now? Could you not before? Did you try before and it didn't work or something? How about other people? Were you able to install it? Okay. So, I mean, it's not a huge deal if you weren't able to install it beforehand. So, and I have it open already. So if you install it, and this one's free, again, you need an Adobe account to install it. Also, you can install it via Creative Cloud as well. So if you have that free student version of Creative Cloud for working at home, then you can install it from that Creative Cloud application as well. So this is a character creation software for games and animation. So if I just open it up and I'm creating a new model, and so I wanted you to check this out. So normally we would be in the lab, you'd be able to use it on the computers. So I'm just gonna walk you through a really simple thing. So you have, first you have to pick a head. So this is like a base head. So they have like, you know, like a number of different heads here that you can choose from to start off with. So I'm actually gonna, and you can, if you hold down Alt, you can drag around to look around from different angles. I'm actually gonna choose the zombie head. And then you could choose a torso. And if you choose like one that doesn't go with the other thing, sometimes it looks a little bit funny. But if it's like a torso, then it's probably going to be under clothes, so it won't matter too much. You can see that it does change the skin to match to some degree. So you could choose like legs. And it's a little bit slow. So there's a little bit of a delay. You can see where it's like trying to match the material of the skin. And then arms, so we're just picking whatever. And so we have a very, very strange character here. Right, so so we've selected the torso, the leg, the arm, and the head, and we have like a full human type person. So now if you go under customize, and the UI for this is really small on my computer. So I'm not going to go through too much, but if you look at these sliders, they give you the ability to, it's basically like a character creator. So if you've ever used like a more complex character creator, there's no liver options in here, unfortunately, but you can actually change the wrist position. You can change the nose, the angle of like the lips, whether the person's cross-eyed or not. You can change their expression as well. Let's see. Like this is the cocky slider, the awkward slider, and you can affect the face in different ways. So you have a whole number, all kinds of different options here. You can also randomize it. So I can, let's see. So you can get some different variations. Like if you don't care too much about like, you just want a realistic person, like maybe a background character or something, you can just randomize it. And you can also actually, you have control over the mesh if you want to modify. You can also like hover over it and you can drag it as well, which is cool. So you can like, oh, I want to move this nose or make it bigger. or whatever. I find that it's easier and more specific when you work with the sliders though, so I don't use it too much. And then if you look at, so we went, assemble was where we put together the individual pieces. Customize is where we set up all these sliders to make the person look like we want them to look. Clothing, if you go under there, you can see some basic clothing options. So you can try some of these things. They will fit it to your character. So maybe it's like a zombie soldier or something. So this is tops, and then you have bottoms, so you have like pants and stuff. And you have more control over this than, like, you don't have to use them in their default state. You can actually customize them, which I'll show you in just a minute. You can pick some shoes. And there are extra options down here as well. You know, we want to make sure that we emphasize social distancing and safety, so we want to make sure we're wearing those gloves. And we want to make sure that we have a surgical mask on, because we don't want to encourage bad behavior, right? Cool. So now I have this like weirdo zombie person with a very small torso. If you go under the texture tab right here, and then you can select a particular item, so it could be a clothing item, or it could be the character themselves, the arms or the head or something. So if I select the head, you can then expand these different options, so you can change the age of the skin color. So let's say that instead of the person being green-gray, and went to my other screen, say I want this person to be red, so I can make that person red. There are a whole bunch of different options for the skin, beauty mark placement, details, things like that. You can affect the teeth, facial hair, roughness, all kinds of options in here. So it's pretty extensive, pretty powerful. Also, if you select different kinds of clothing, you can choose different materials that look different on the bottom. So I could change this to a different material if I wanted to. Maybe I want this to be like leather or something. And so you can make it however you want, so you have a lot of control over this. So let's say that I have my humanoid character how I want them. The really cool thing about this is that since it's an Adobe product, you can actually use like this with Mixamo very easily. So if you're working on a humanoid character and you have them where you want them and you want to animate them, all you have to do is go, there's a button in the top right hand corner, send to Mixamo. So I'll just call this one zombie person. So I hit that send to Mixamo, it's going to export the model. So it's exporting the model right now. Hopefully it won't take too long. Minus. Okay. So it opened up Mixamo. It is doing the auto rigging for the character. I'm sorry, there's a lot of waiting. I'm not even sure who Shamar is. I guess they already left. I don't even know if that's someone in the class. I don't remember that person. But everyone's welcome here. So it's still doing the auto rigging, but it's gonna auto rig it, and then it'll have the materials and everything imported, so I can choose animations that I want, and I can export it for Unity or Unreal or whatever I want to use it with. So it's very convenient to make humanoid characters using something like Adobe Fuse. You can also later on, you can go and modify the model in something like Blender if you wanted to tweak something. So now we have our weird redheaded zombie, you know, using proper PPE. So I can hit finish. So we can either just download the rig model or we can animate it. So I almost always want to use their animations because they're very good. So I go to animate, and then we could do samba dancing or something. And now, isn't that beautiful? We have a lovely red-headed zombie. Very jovial, happy, you know. It's a very not coronavirus behavior. I don't know what coronavirus behavior would be like. Is there like a coughing one? That'd be good. Or we could pick something more zombie-like. World traveling. What do you mean by world traveling? But yeah, I've actually used Adobe Fuse and Mixamo for, like, I made avatar for myself. So if I go to my website, which is junomoro.com, about coronavirus behavior. Ah, yes, world traveling. So I actually made this in Adobe Fuse, exported it to Mixamo. I worked on some of the stuff in Blender. I tweaked the hair and the glasses and stuff. So you can actually, and then I have it interactive in Unity. And this is just to create an avatar or an image for my website. So you can actually make something that like looks realistic or looks is useful. So cool. All right, so let's see that. So you'll have the option for your homework to do either a keyframe animation that's like an advertisement for the can you made, or something else if you have a different idea. So you know how we had the can, it was like kind of rotating and looking around. You can imagine in like a TV commercial or something, how like if it's showing some product, you have some like flyby with the camera or something and it zooms in, something like that. So you could do that for the optional assignment this week. Or alternatively, you can have a humanoid character, either in, you can make it in Adobe Fuse, which we just did together, or you could do it in Blender, import it into Mixamo, and then that can be your alternative. So if you're doing one in Fuse, then I would recommend doing a character from your game, if at all possible. So thinking about the design of that character, thinking about what they're supposed to look like, how they're supposed to behave, and then picking something appropriate, setting them up to look that way. Does that make sense? Here's another cloth simulation one, and you can see this one also has the cloth simulation, so it's kind of bouncing as well. Okay, cool. So does this stuff seem doable for you all? Like, does it seem, or like, do you feel lost? Was it like too much? The hard, because we talked about like we looked at a bunch of different ways of doing stuff, because this is just like trying to get your feet wet with animation. And being familiar with the terms is really important, because later on in the program you'll need to be doing this kind of stuff more often, more frequently. It might be useful also if you end up taking the 3D computer animation class, which is GD110. So if you have, this course is a prerequisite, so if you take this course and you complete it, then you'll be able to take the 3D computer animation course. Okay. So, I'm not sure if you've realized this, but you know how many weeks of class we have left? If you look at the calendar, we only have 2 weeks of class left. Only 2 weeks left. Yeah, the semester is almost over. So May 8th is the last day of class for us. So yes, really, it's weird. There's like the meme where like March lasted like 12 years, and April lasted like a second. So it depends on the class. So since we're a Friday class, we had our first day of the semester was earlier than a lot of other classes, so they might be ending later. Also, we're not using the final exam period, so every class is going to be different, but the final week of regular class for Friday classes is May 8th. So, alright, so for the rest of the semester, which is just the 2 weeks, for the most part, you're going to be working on your final project. So you have a final project that you'll be working on the next 2 weeks. That final project is actually a portfolio-oriented project. It shouldn't be really any additional material, or if it is, not much than what you've already done throughout the semester. So in this, you're going to, you've done probably like 11 assignments throughout the semester. So you're going to pick the 10 best assignments, and for those assignments, you're going to be creating a presentation video. In that video, you're talking about what you did with the project, with each individual assignment, what you learned, what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy, about that particular week's assignment. Because remember, this is like a survey class, so we've done all kinds of different things, right? We did pixel art, we did like basic visual design stuff, we did sketching, we did 3D modeling, we did everything. So you'll go back through your assignments, you'll figure out which ones you like the best, and this includes the zines as well. It also includes the optional 3D sculpt project. I think it was a sculpt project, or the one from the optional week. So your 10 best assignments. You can also work on, you can make new versions if you want for this. And so you're creating creating a demo video where you're talking and showing each one of those assignments. And it doesn't have to be a video where you're like talking, or where you're like physically seen, because I know a lot of people are shy. But it's better if you have some kind of voiceover. You could also do like subtitles or something. So I'm just going to show you. So this is, again, the first time this class has ever been run. So thank you, guinea pigs. So I'm just going to show you a video from another one of my classes. So as an example, just so you have an idea of what a video presentation for a final one might look like. So any questions first before we do that? Can you believe it's almost the end of the semester? So this will be due on May 8th. So that's when the final videos will be due. So you, in GD110, you did some work with Premiere. So this doesn't have to be like a masterpiece. We just want to be able to see, like, you to share what you've worked on throughout the semester. So hopefully you have some work that you're proud of. So sad because it's almost over, right? I hope that's why you're sad. Any suggestions on what programs you can use to make the video? So Premiere would be good for editing it. So again, you have Adobe Creative Cloud Access at home, following the instructions. You can use that. There's other video editing software. I might try to find another option for you if you don't. I mean, honestly, anything you want to use is going to be fine. The idea is just that you convey what you worked on, how you worked on it, how it went, what you learned from it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the video. So I'm going to stop the music. Computer's going really slow. I have too much stuff open. So here you go. So here's an example from Samantha Reap, who is a student previously in my Game Programming 2 class. So this was a presentation for the end of the semester. So this is not for this class because no one's done a final presentation for this class. So I'm just going to play the video just to give you an idea of what it could look like. And she also doesn't like hearing the sound of her own voice. So what she used is a speech, or what is it, text to speech thing. So like you could type in a script and it will basically read it off. So here we go.
Hello ladies and gents. Today I'm going to talk about the tasks I've completed for Game Programming 2. You might be wondering why I used a robot to speak for me.
Sorry, I forgot to switch back. Where we started.
Hello ladies and gents. Today I'm going to talk about the tasks I've completed for Game Programming 2. You might be wondering why I used a robot to speak for me. Well, that's because I don't feel like talking and this sounds more entertaining. So let's get started with the first communal goal. One of the things I have taught a student about was the particle system. The particle system is a special effect that revolves around particles, such as rain, dust, fire, smoke, and blood. As shown here, I demonstrated one of the particles I wanted to put into my group's final game. Particle systems are fun to play around with, and I thought it would have been a fun thing to learn and teach. Now for the second goal. We used Unity to do our weekly homework, such as how to make a game where stuff follows each other.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
And our final project. I feel like I can check this one out. Now for our third goal. Let's see if there is no clipping in the final game. And now, for the hard part, importing at least 5 animations, or textures in the game and use them accordingly. Here are 5 textures and animations I've implemented in the work I've done throughout the semester. The only animation I was able to cram into this semester was our dancing queen here. Look at her go. The next 4 textures are as follows. The soldiers here consist of 2 textures for both teams in the group's final game. The skybox itself is a texture, well 6 textures, but let's count this as 1. The last texture that was used was the grass shown here.
So I think that's pretty much the rest of the video. Pretty entertaining video. So this one was pretty short. So she did some screen recordings and she used, I think, Bandicam, which I've seen some other students use. For screen recording, I personally use OBS Studio, which is also used for streaming, so I'm using it right now. You can also use, let's see, I think Light Screen is something. I also use Snagit. Snagit is another thing. These are Windows applications. So you could imagine, and again, this is for a different class, but you can imagine how you could have a video presentation showing your work from each week. So you have 10 assignments. It doesn't matter which 10, it's whichever ones you like the most. If you don't have 10, then you can do the optional assignments to make it up to 10. So I know that, let's see if I can switch this back. All right, so I'm just dragging my windows back. Let's get the music going again. Okay. So you can also edit stuff. If you want to edit video, you can even use Photoshop. Photoshop allows you to create videos and edit them. So you can import video files, and there's like a timeline function in Photoshop, which I've actually used it when Premiere was broken for some reason. And it does work, and you can actually edit like levels and things like that using the Photoshop interface, which is nice. So the last, I talked about the final, it only has to be 10. Yeah, so it doesn't matter which 10, but you're just picking whichever 10 you want to talk about. Ideally the best 10 you have. So if you have one that was really weak, then just omit it. If you have ones that you didn't do, just do the assignments and get up to 10. If you did all the assignments, you don't have to do any extra work besides just putting the video together. So, any other questions about that final portfolio video presentation? It'll be exciting to see everyone talk about their work and share it as well. So we'll probably have like some kind of final class. We'll probably use Blackboard Collaborate Ultra on May 8th to like come back together and kind of debrief on the semester. So I'll put the details on how to submit stuff on River later. You have 2 weeks from now, yeah, for the videos to come together. So you don't have any homework that's due next time unless you want to do the optional assignment that I talked about earlier, which was either the keyframe animation or the rigged character. So let's see. So some people have asked about homework assignments, if they're falling behind or whatever, or someone asked about withdrawing. So please do not withdraw from the class. I know they changed deadlines and stuff, but I know everyone's going through a lot of shit right now, and it's hard to pay attention, hard to focus. So anything that you want, get a grade on. Even if you didn't submit it before, submit it by May 8th if you want credit. So any assignment from the semester. So if you missed, even if it's before coronavirus hit, so like please don't withdraw. You can make up all the assignments. So normally I wouldn't do this because those deadlines are really helpful, but these are not normal times, right? So no one's working at peak efficiency right now. So all you have to do is whatever assignments you're going to make them up by the last day of class, and then you'll get a grade in. Does that make sense? I hope that's fair. Is that fair to people? Because everyone's dealing with a lot of shit right now. So you might have a lot of work to do in the next 2 weeks. But you can do it, right? Like 2 weeks is still, if you dedicate yourself, you can make up, you can make up a lot in 2 weeks. Please no bleach injections, please don't do that. So, like I said, I normally wouldn't give you, wouldn't be so lax about these things, but because, sometimes we need deadlines, right? Deadlines are really helpful for us. But again, these aren't normal times, so I want people to feel like they can get the work in. I want people to benefit from this semester. If you withdraw, then you don't have the please don't withdraw. Okay, I'm making it really easy, so you can do it. I believe in you. If you couldn't do it before, you can do it now, because now you have motivation. You know that you can retake the semester, right? I know it's hard from home, right? Like when you're on campus, like when you're in the class, it's a lot easier. So now you have the opportunity, even if you've been doing all the assignments since the stay-at-home order, you can go back and submit the stuff from earlier in the semester as well. So you can get an A in this class. Because all of the earlier weekly assignments, they're completion grades. So as long as if you followed through with the spirit and didn't just do like a stick, nothing wrong with stick figure, but if you didn't just do like 5 minutes on it, if you spend longer than 5 minutes, then it's probably fine. Ideally, like an hour, 3 hours, depends on the assignment, obviously. So just do your best. This is an opportunity to retake the semester. Even if you were not feeling great about the class before all of this pandemic nonsense. So everyone's on the same page. The most important thing in this class is getting through it, right? Getting through it and hopefully learning something, growing throughout the process. So if you're doing it now instead of earlier, then that's fine. So I want you to get through the class. So are there Are there any other questions about that final project? You have the portfolio video. We'll say like up to 5 minutes long. And submit anything you want to, honestly, before May 8th or grade. After May 8th, I can't promise anything because we gotta get grades in. Sorry, my cat wants out. So if you have questions, put them in the chat. I'll be right back just a second. Still air. Yeah, no problem. So, yeah, so if there aren't any questions about the material or anything, I'll just you know, wrap up the stream today. So I'll post something in River with the details about the video presentation. Yeah, I love Ariel. It's my cat. This cat's also very cute. I don't know if, sorry, it's covered in dirt, but isn't that a cute cat? So yeah, all the classes are generally short because like we don't have, I mean, you could have work time in class, and in some of my classes I have that, but I feel like it's, if we can keep it a little bit shorter, it's better because people have wandering attention spans. So I'll stay in here for another minute, but for everyone else, have a great night. I hope you're able to you know, get some work done in the next 2 weeks. So we'll have class next week. We'll still talk about interfaces, but there won't. I don't think there's going to be any assignment associated with interfaces. So, yep. Good night. Sorry, it's not starting soon. It's over.